back. Good Thursday morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm Maria Bartiromo, and it is Thursday, June 4th. It is just before 8 a.m. on the button on the East Coast. NASA unveiling its plans to advance America's leadership in space, working with President Trump to build a permanent moon base. The base would be used as a hub for Artemis astronauts to live and work on the moon. It's expected to roll out in phases, beginning with robotic missions before implementing infrastructure and ultimately supporting sustained human lunar presence. NASA currently in the process of testing a mobile wastewater treatment system. Students at the University of North Dakota will test it out under conditions similar to life on another planet. We are going to be talking with Jared Isaacman momentarily about this plan, but I want to get your take, the panel, Steve Forbes and John Lonsky, on the use of technology and how it is, in fact, extending so much from the military to our devices to even space. Your thoughts, Steve? This is a national security issue, in my view.
It is indeed, and underscores President Trump's decision in his first term to create the Space Force. Everyone made fun of it, but it turns out that's where the future is, especially in military technology. We're going to have space vehicles that can fire missiles, in effect, from space precisely at any point in our infrastructure here in the United States and elsewhere. So, yeah, the faster we do it, the better.
Yeah, and no wonder AI companies are doing so well. This has not only been a technology issue, but look at these semiconductor stocks year to date. You mentioned Micron Technology earlier. Memory is soaring in price, and you've got these names higher across the board.
And it tells us that there's quite a future ahead for technology, for AI, and it's going to improve our living standards, and it'll make us more productive. I'm not so certain that AI is going to permanently destroy all these jobs, that we're going to have a smaller workforce than otherwise. I think it's going to make each of us more productive. And
the nice thing for those of us who are getting older, imagine getting drugs in a week instead of 10 or 12 years. I'm all for it.
That's unbelievable. Look at these stocks, by the way. Micron up 250% just year to date. Sandex is up 630% year to date. Semiconductors on fire. Joining me now in this Fox Business exclusive is NASA Administrator Jared Isaacman. Jared, thanks very much for being here this morning. Congrats on all you're doing. What more can you tell us about this in terms of this innovation and your plan to actually have our astronauts have a place to be on the moon right now?
Well, I'll tell you, it's an incredibly exciting time at NASA, and I'd love to take credit for the plan, but the credit actually goes to President Trump. On my first day on the job, he signed a national space policy. It said pick up where Apollo 17 left off, return American astronauts to the surface of the moon, but this time to stay, to build the enduring presence, to master the skills for where we inevitably go next, which is Mars, and we're well on our way. Just last week, we announced the first awards of many, because we're going to be landing on the moon robotic, uncrewed, on a near monthly cadence. So it's going to take the contributions from across industry. So we announced the first two lander rovers, actually. So these are going to be autonomous and crewed. So someday in the not too distant future, when Artemis 4 returns NASA astronauts to the surface of the moon, they're going to have a couple lunar dune buggies waiting for them. Yeah,
I mean, that's unbelievable, Jared. I know you want to return to the moon before the president's finish for the term, this second term, but China also wants that. And I spoke with President Trump about it, and I wonder what you have to say in terms of where China is. They're pretty close to us, aren't they? Do you believe that the U.S. will beat China to the moon, to the return?
So I do believe that, and you know, it's great to have the support of President Trump. I spoke to him twice last week. I spoke to him after he returned from his trip from China on this subject itself. Now, America is obviously incredibly advantaged. We've been to the moon before. We did it many times during the Apollo era. We're going back, but we're doing it different this time. We're going back to, of course, build the moon base itself. Now, I would say in terms of constructing the moon base, we're very advantaged. Investments made in years past in what we call our CLIPS program allows us to scale up mass to the surface of the moon. Lots of landers, lots of rovers, test all the things we're going to need to understand from power, communications, navigations. We're very advantaged in terms of building the moon base. When it comes to putting the boots on the moon itself, well, that's a space race. It's going to be very close. I would say our timing right now is before the end of 2028. The Chinese have said they're going to put their technauts on the moon before 2030. That means sometime in 2029. It means this race is going to come down to months, not years.
So are you seeing any evidence that China could surprise us and beat us to it?
I would just say it's a very close race, Maria. I mean, they just announced in response to our ignition program. So the NASA ignition program is how we intend to meet President Trump's national space policy. Just a few weeks after that, the Chinese came out with their own grand reorganization strategy to move even faster. So they're combining their civil and their military space programs to have more resources and more agility. Now, I would say I'm not sure there was always a distinction truly between their civil and their military space programs in the past, but the bottom line is the Chinese are responding and they're moving.
All right, I'm going to play a soundbite of the way Trump answered that question when I brought it up. But let's get to Artemis and the program there. NASA's Artemis program preparing to return humans to the moon, beginning with the Artemis 2 launch earlier this year. That was the first crewed Artemis flight, marking a key step forward in the return to the moon while building a foundation for future crewed missions to Mars. Jared, tell us about Artemis program and where it stands after Artemis 2 and its success.
Artemis 2 was a great success. I mean, contributions from the best and brightest across NASA, not to mention 4 outstanding astronauts that brought the whole world with us on this journey. What are we doing now? We're getting ready for Artemis 3. We're already taking delivery of a lot of the hardware to build another rocket, just like you saw in that video for that Artemis 2 flew into space. We're going to start stacking that rocket this summer. We're going to do wet dress tests before the end of the year. Now, the objective of Artemis 3 is not to go around the moon. The objective is very akin to Apollo 9, where we're going to put the Orion spacecraft in Earth orbit. We're going to rendezvous it with both lunar landers, so one from Blue Origin, one from SpaceX, test out the interoperability of the lander, get very comfortable with it in 2027 in advance of 2028, where we'll take one of those landers to the surface of the moon on Artemis 4.
Yeah, that was incredible. What the plan was in terms of the Artemis 2. You walked us through that before the launch. And for Artemis 2, there were 3 U.S. astronauts and 1 Canadian astronaut. And you watched that go around the moon. They were in space for 10 days in that tiny space aircraft. What can you tell us about what they told you when they got back?
Well, we've debriefed with them extensively. First of all, I'll tell you, they are so thankful for the opportunity. I mean, you know, their eyes, you know, have seen things that we haven't been, you know, that haven't been, you know, ever seen before in terms of the far side of the moon and certain of their some of their scientific observations. They felt incredibly fortunate to be there, knowing, as they like to describe, you know, they're carrying the baton. You know, that is the first leg in a relay race here, which is it's incredibly hard to go to the moon. It's very hard to go, to stay, to build an enduring presence. Yeah. They were one important step on the journey. Now they are passing off all their learnings, everything that went really well in the Orion spacecraft, the things that didn't go so well. I mean, you know, we learn every time on this, and that's getting rolled into fixes for Artemis 3, and that knowledge is being passed off to the Artemis 3 crew.
Well, that was 8.8 million pounds of propulsion and a thrust moving at 25,000 miles an hour. But what happened last week, Jared? A new Glenn rocket belonging to Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin exploded last week during an engine firing test. The failure wiped out plans for an early June launch and destroyed the rocket and damaged the Cape Canaveral launch pad. Blue Origin said it hopes to put another rocket up by the end of the year. Jared, how do you see it? I know you surveyed the damage.
So that's correct, and I'll tell you, we are doing everything we can to support, you know, Blue Origin, their new Glenn program, their lander that we need for the lunar surface. This is a whole government response. The U.S. Space Force, General Saltzman, directed a lot of resources there that were on site because the explosion happened on the on the Cape Canaveral Space Force Base, which is adjacent, obviously, to Kennedy Space Center. I arrived with my team immediately. Jeff Bezos and Dave Limp from Blue Origin arrived immediately. And everybody is responding quickly. NASA is going to deploy subject matter experts to help with the investigation, to get to root cause of the problem, help them rebuild the pad. Now, what I will say is we are also decoupling the lander from the launch vehicle and the pad itself. What does that mean? It means NASA is laser focused on the lander, because we're laser focused on our mission to return astronauts to the surface of the moon before 2028. And we're going to be able to keep that lander in development, progressing, so it's available for our test mission in 2027, which is Artemis 3, and potentially available to meet our landing objectives in 2028. So it's a setback that happens in this business. It's incredibly complicated. A rocket is a controlled explosion, whether you're going to Earth orbit, 17,500 miles an hour, escape velocity 25,000 miles an hour. It's an awful lot of energy. Things will happen. We have to learn from it and be ready to move forward.
Well, it's a great point that these things are going to happen, but let's remember that not only did President Trump create the Space Force, but he also put, what, $10 billion in the big, beautiful bill? So you've got the resources to do what you need to do, and you're talking about building a space nuclear reactor on the moon. Elon Musk is talking about building data centers on the moon. If you have a nuclear reactor, it could reduce travel times into space, including missions to Mars. And I want to get your take on that. Here's President Trump when I asked him if, in fact, China will beat us. Watch this.
One of my greatest achievements, I think, will be the fact that I started Space Force, because we were losing to Russia and China, and now we're way ahead of them.
And we're going to beat China to the moon.
I think so. Look, we already did many years ago. You know, maybe they'll get lucky. They'll send a ship up or something.
Maybe they'll get lucky, he said.
Well, we're not going to depend on luck. We're going to take all of the resources, including that $10 billion, one-time plus-up that came from the Working Family Tax Cut Act. That was President Trump's signature legislation. We're going to take a national space policy. We have bipartisan support from across Congress, and we have the best and brightest between NASA and our industry and industrial partners. We have the resources to achieve this objective and do so before the end of President Trump's term. And again, not just for the flags and footprints, but to build the base, to master the skills, to leverage nuclear power and propulsion, like you said. We're building SR-1 Freedom so that someday we can send American astronauts to the surface of Mars and bring them back home safely to tell us about it.
Well, this is incredible, really, the innovation underway. So thank you for that. I mean, and NASA officially also declared the Mars Maven spacecraft dead after months of radio silence in space. The first mission devoted to observing Mars officially coming to a close after 11 years in orbit. Jared, what can you tell us there?
Well, I'd say that's not unexpected. I mean, whenever we put satellites into space, especially deep space, it's an incredibly harsh environment. There's radiation that's out there. There's micrometeoroids and orbital debris that can cause damage. There's only a finite amount of life for some of these. The good news is what comes next is already in works. So we have now the Mars telecommunication orbiter contract that's out. Industry has responded to it. There's a lot of companies that want to build the eyes and ears for the moon. There's a lot of companies that want to build the eyes and ears for Mars. So Maven's replacement is in works.
Well, we were talking yesterday with Kathy Wood, who, of course, is a big investor in SpaceX. She's very happy that the company's about to go public. And she was talking about Starlink and the importance of Starlink to government, Jared. What can you tell us about that? Because the U.S. has been increasingly relying on Elon Musk's Starlink.
Well, I would just say, I mean, Starlink is a capability that's important not just for the United States government, for really humanity. I mean, I think access to information is foundational to solving many of the world's problems. You know, it's very hard to run fiber across, oceans and deserts. There are a lot of disconnected people around the world that are being connected. So aside from its benefits to humanity right now, of course, it has great benefits, to the United States government when it's connectivity on our ships, on airplanes. They have a completely separate constellation that serves national security work. It's certainly helpful for NASA when we start thinking about optical communications for, say, Artemis 3. But there are many others working on it. I mean, I was just in a briefing not that long ago where it was described we are in the platinum age of orbital connectivity, and it's going to be immensely helpful for what we do on the lunar base.
Wow, that is incredible. Jared, thanks very much for the update. Good to see you.
Great. It's always a pleasure, Maria. Thank you.
Thank you. Jared Isaacman joining us. Stay with us. We'll be right back.